Good evening, everyone. My name is Minister Janae Ashley Colvin. I'm one of the ministry coordinators in the Office of Religious Diversity and Pastoral Care in the Division of Mission and Ministry, which is a whole lot of words. That means that I get to work with the Mission and Ministry team to provide programming and support and presence to the students here at DePaul. I'll be moderating our panel this evening. Before we get started, I just want to make a few housekeeping announcements. The first one is we are recording this evening, so please just be mindful of that. If you have to leave your seat, do your best to stay to the outsides of the aisles if you are able to do that, so that we can make sure that we keep a clear shot for the recording that we're doing. Also, there are plenty of refreshments left outside. Feel free to quietly sneak in and out and get them. They're there for your enjoyment. Once we start, you don't have to feel like, oh my God, I didn't get a quesadilla snack and I can't have one. Just go get one. Also, I'm usually that person who's afraid to open a pop at an event. Just open it, you'll be good. You're supposed to. You'll be fine. Also, if you are one of our amazing student leaders that's here for Common Mission, after the program, you can meet with Delaney. Delaney, where are you? So we can wave and tell everybody who you are. She's outside? Okay, well, she's swiping at the table, so when I get another chance at the end, I will make sure she gives y'all a wave. But if you're one of our student leaders here to fulfill your pillars for Common Mission, you can meet her in Suite 311 just down the hall to check in, to get credit for that, and to do a quick little debrief, reflection, assessment of the program. Do you have any other announcements we need to share? No, we're good? Great! So thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I am so excited to see all of you all's faces in the room. This program was so successful last year that we were overjoyed to present it to you again this year. And this year's theme is Fueled by Faith. We are joined tonight by 4 incredible women whose activism and spirituality provide space for us to imagine how we can live our faith and change the world around us. Fueled by Faith is an acknowledgement of both the responsibility and the power we have to do something bold in the world. Each of our panelists work in different areas, on different yet intersecting issues, and do their work in different ways. And we hope that in hearing their stories and their perspectives this evening, you will leave here knowing that we all have a part to play. Whatever beliefs drive us to action, our work is necessarily interconnected. And whatever actions we take, the ways we practice, pray, or center ourselves are an integral part of what makes those actions productive and possible. With us tonight is the esteemed Sister Helen Prejean from the Ministry Against the Death Penalty. She's been with us all week, and last night we had an amazing time during a screening of the documentary on her work called Sister. It was the director's cut, and it was awesome. And we got to talk with her and Rose Vines, who collaborates with her on the work that they do, the necessary and challenging work of opposing the death penalty and supporting those who've been placed on death row. We also have joining us Tamar Manasseh, sitting right here to my right, founder and president of Mothers Against Senseless Killings, also known as MASK. Joy Zavala, who is the vice president, events and outreach chairperson and a minister's assistant at the Midwest Buddhist Temple. And Zaynab Shahar, who is an activist, writer, and PhD student in comparative religion at Chicago Theological Seminary. Let's thank them all for being here tonight. So I'd like to start by asking each panelist to just take a few minutes to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about the work you do, and thank you so much. I told them before we started, they were like, who put this together? How did we get here? And I told them we all sat in a room and we made a list of all the people we really, really want to hear. And I was like, none of y'all were on the B list, just so you know. Like, you know how you plan to win? And then you have like the people you really want, and then you're like, okay, if they don't come, who we got? All of them said yes, and we were like overjoyed. So Tamar said she was going to change her Facebook status to not back up. I like that. So please take a moment to introduce yourselves to the audience. We can just start right here.
Do we really want to start with me?
Yes.
There's so much more. No. I'm like, I want to hear her. Like, hey, like I'm Tamar.
Y'all, we're going to have to try to get along, y'all.
Oh my goodness. This is a wonderful panel. Thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you for making me an A-lister. You just made my whole day. My name is Tamar Manasseh. I am the founder and president of Mask, Mothers and Men Against Senseless Killings. I started Mask 6 years ago. And I just honestly, I don't even call myself an activist or anything. I'm just a mom, and I didn't want my kids to die. So I had to do something. And because, I mean, I might kind of be just a little bit of a helicopter mom, just a little. I mean, since Chicago wasn't gonna save my kids, I decided I had to go do it myself. And in the process, I had to save everybody else's too, or at least try. So every day, we sit out on a street corner in Inglewood and we cook dinner every night, 7 days a week in the summer.
What y'all cook?
It's whatever people bring, whatever we can get on that grill.
Okay.
But normally, we make sure the kids get the hot dogs, hamburgers, chicken, whatever. But we make sure the kids still get a hot meal every single day in the summer. When normally, CPS, some kids may only get meals from school. And in the summer, if there's no school, they don't get anything. So we make sure that we provide that. So we not only address food insecurity, but also homelessness, job readiness and preparation, all kinds of stuff, violence. We deal with all of that. So yeah, that's kind of what I do. Now you.
Well, I don't cook food. But I mean, as soon as you mentioned food, after Hurricane Katrina, there was a group of people that got under the Mississippi River Bridge and cooked red beans and rice for months and fed like 1,000 people a day. I mean, a lot of us just take food for granted, but food can't be taken for granted. I mean, food is just so essential. And DePaul knows how to use food. You notice in these events? Now, I noticed that y'all have stayed. I know that you had the food available to you and you could have taken off. But here you are. So we know you on the A-list. Everybody in here is on the A-list. So you know what, I'm just thinking, you're a mom that doesn't want your kids to be killed. I got involved in the death penalty just as a Catholic nun that started working in the St. Thomas housing projects among African American people after I got woke. Like in my 40s, I think God's let me live a long time because it took me so long first to wake up. And then to go to St. Thomas where African American people became my teachers. They're still being my teachers, of course, because I came up in white privilege. And during the Jim Crow days in Louisiana, where Ellen worked in the house with Mom and Jesse worked in the yard, lived in the servants' quarters, and I never questioned it, because that's what culture does. You know, Mom and Daddy were kind, and they helped Ellen and Jesse get a house, helped Jesse get a job at the refinery, but never questioned the Jim Crow laws. That, you know, that they couldn't sit on the bus with white people, or Sacred Heart Church couldn't sit with us. And that's culture. And I realized that, and that's in my book. I just wrote a book called River of Fire, and it's the awakening journey that brought me to death row. The last page of River of Fire is the opening page of Dead Man Walking. So my journey's been not knowing nothing from nothing, getting in the African American community who became my teachers and taught me about everything. And then getting an invitation to write a man on death row. And I want to say a little bit about the faith thing. The Jesus gospel is very dangerous, but it's been made very comfortable. I mean, you know, well, I believe in Jesus. I go to church on Sundays. I'm a polite Christian. But I only hang out in my little circle. And I don't go out, and so now we got Pope Francis stirring the pot in the Catholic Church. There are a lot of people who hate Pope Francis because they want to just be able to stay with the way the Catholic faith has been, and here are the dogmas, you believe these things, you go to church, and you're a good Catholic, and he's saying go to the margins, you know, the gospel of encounter, get out of your comfortable circle, go to the margins where people are suffering. Like go to the border right now. Some of our sisters are down there with the immigrants on the southern border with all that's going on with people. The Jesus of the margins. And so I finally awakened to that. And then that's what really led me to St. Thomas. And then it was a simple act. But once you're in the matrix, once you're in the soil, once you're in the current, then things are going to happen. And out of St. Thomas, then, one day I got this invitation to write A Man on Death Row. And I wrote him, and I had no idea 2.5 years later he'd be executed, that I would be there, that I would witness his death, and that it would change me forever. So that's a little short version. And then coming out of that execution chamber, realizing that like 90% of the people in Louisiana believed in the death penalty when Pat was executed in '84. They just supported it. They didn't know. And nobody was close to what it really meant to take a live human being from that cell and kill him. And so I'm meeting the guards who had to do the execution. I'm meeting the warden who has to be the first one. I'm meeting all these people and seeing how it's affecting them. And so I came out after the execution and just realized that people are never going to see this. It's a secret ritual. I've been two tries at courts to make executions public so people would see. And they've both been defeated. No, we don't want the people to see it. And they use all kind of arguments about why you can't let that happen. But I was there. And I was a witness. So I came out that night after that execution around 1 o'clock in the morning, threw up, and then I remember just thinking, it was really clear, like you gotta see these kids being killed, you'd see the system, you'd see it, and you gotta do something. So what could I do? So I just started getting out telling the story, and then I wrote a book. And then they made a movie of the book. Susan Sarandon was behind that. She pestered Tim Robbins for 9 months, where probably for domestic tranquility broke down, read the nuns book, they did the film, and I got to collaborate with them throughout the whole making of the film, and they did a good job, just to bring people over to both sides. So when you hear prosecutors say, this is justice, we're gonna do for the victim's family, what does happen to the victim's family when they're waiting 20 years to go sit on that front row and watch? Then as the state kills one or kill their loved one, how does that help people heal, really? And so the movie did that, and then the opera of Dead Man Walking has done it too. Plus wonderful music that instructs emotions and helps bring you through that same journey, though, from the outrage over a terrible crime to a person being executed, and then who are we as a society? So I love coming to DePaul. DePaul has our archives of Dead Man Walking, of the manuscripts, of all the stuff we're put into the keeping of Morgan sitting there, and Jamie and Derek. Wonderful archives, which we dig into again because we're getting ready to do the graphic novel of Dead Man Walking to reach out to young people. And they got it, boy. They got everything there. You can't even hold a pen in your hands when you go in there. They only give you a pencil. I mean, just to know how careful they are with it. And they got everything in our archives. They got from the making of the film, from the making of the opera, they got the book, they got the manuscript, and they got everything in there. And it's wonderful to go in there. I hadn't been in there in a while. So because they have the archives, then I come back every year. And this year, I have Rose Vines with me, who does our social media. And so we reach millions of people because of her work, expanding our voice and the conversation and dialogue with social media. So glad to be here.
Well, I have papers that I'm going to read from because I'm afraid.
Go ahead.
I'm afraid that I will leave something out.
Do whatever you want to do.
I'm Joy Zavala, and I'm a member of the Midwest Buddhist Temple located in Old Town. We have 2 projects that take place at our temple that help the homeless. One project is transforming plastic bags into sleeping mats. It was started at our temple by the Women's Association in 2014 and is part of the organization called New Life for Old Bags. There are also other locations in the Chicago area that host these events. Plastic bags are used to make mats for the homeless. They are cut into strips, tied together, and crocheted. It takes around 700 to 800 plastic bags per mat, and each mat is 3 feet by 6 feet. One mat takes a total of around 80 hours to complete, from cutting the plastic into strips, which is called plarn or plastic yarn, tying them together and crocheting them. We have made a total of 148 mats. I have made only 3 mats, and I can tell you it is hard on the shoulders and hands because we use giant crochet hooks and the plastic is difficult to pull. It is good for the environment because plastic bags are recycled and different congregations come together in one place to help in the common goal of making something for the homeless to be more comfortable. We have delivered them to people under viaducts and at tent cities. And I brought one today.
Here, you want to hold your mic?
I don't know where
You want
we
to spread it out? Here, let me help you hold it so they can see.
So this is what it looks like. It takes a long time. It's really. Our sandwich making project started in January 2016. People kept saying, let's help the homeless, but nothing was ever done. So I did some research and found Sarah Circle, a women's shelter in Uptown. Their website is great, and one of the projects for volunteers is to make 50 sandwich bags, one for each woman who lives at the interim women's shelter. Each bag should have a sandwich, a piece of fruit, a granola bar, and chips. We created a group of several people, so a few of us made sandwiches. Someone put the sandwiches into bags. A couple of people wrote the type of sandwich on the bags, and another person filled the bags. We will occasionally have other people or groups, such as Girl Scouts, come and help us. We then started taking sandwiches to a men's shelter on Lawrence, just around the corner from Sarah Circle. There may be around 40 men there when we visit them. Then we go downtown to a men's hotel on Van Buren. Some men can afford to live there for a week at a time, but they cannot afford food. The last time we took sandwiches, it was at the end of the month when they were low on money, and they really appreciated the sandwiches. We would also drive to Lower Wacker or under viaducts and give sandwiches to people we saw there. Then we looked for tent cities. There was one group of very nice men who moved around, usually near the Chicago River, and their leader was named Elmo. So we would yell, "Hey Elmo," and he would come up to meet us. We haven't seen them lately, but some of those people may be at the tent city on Roosevelt near the expressway. That tent city has gotten a lot of attention lately, and lots of groups have dropped by there with food. The area had become very dirty with lots of garbage, and the city finally cleaned it up. But in the process, they also cleared tents with personal belongings. There are now around 20 people living there who said they don't really need food, but could use other items such as clothing and deodorant. Some of the people there work but cannot afford housing, and they don't want to live in shelters because they are afraid their belongings will be stolen. They don't want to live in close quarters with others, and the shelters have curfews. We recently found another group, Lincoln Park Community Services. They have a shelter in the basement of a church on Fullerton, and they can use 30 sandwiches, so we delivered them last month. They house 35 single men and women and will be moving to a new building close to our temple, which will house 70 people. At Sarah Circle, we started to make hot dinners around the holidays. They encourage groups not only to make and serve food, but to sit down and eat with them. Hearing some of their stories really resonated with me. One woman had a master's degree from Northwestern University, but was diagnosed with cancer, used her money on treatments, eventually lost her job, and ended up at the shelter. Another woman was a nurse and encountered hard times. Many of the women living there, like people at other shelters or the tent city, have jobs but cannot afford housing. We have empathy and compassion for them because we realize we are all human beings and homelessness can happen to anyone. One time, after serving a hot dinner, I said, "See you next time," to one woman, and she said, "I hope not. I hope not to be here very long." I said, "I hope not to see her too." I did not see her after that day, so I assume she found a home. We make our sandwiches with high-quality meat from Costco, cheese, lettuce, and tomatoes. Everyone tells us how good our sandwiches are. We also make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for the vegetarians and for those who crave a childhood favorite. Sometimes we have too many volunteers, so we create jobs for people. We can purchase grapes, strawberries, or cherries and have someone place them in bags. or someone can help separate toiletries or clothing. This is a great way for our congregation to work together for a common goal. We get to know one another, socialize, and form relationships. Some people only want to make sandwiches, and others like delivering them and talking to the recipients. One problem we sometimes have is not having enough drivers, so we have to plan ahead and make sure they are scheduled in advance. Our Sunday school children have also gotten involved with our homeless projects. During the holidays, they assemble gift bags for the women in Sarah's Circle. This past Valentine's Day, they made heart necklaces made out of clay. The children learned compassion, gratitude, and empathy. One 5-year-old boy asked his parents to use his allowance to purchase shampoo for the men's shelter. Siddhartha Gautama was born a prince in 567 BC. After he was enlightened and became a Buddha at the age of 35, he was homeless and spread his teachings, eating what others offered him. The story of his death was that he was given tainted pork by a blacksmith, and he ate it even though he was a vegetarian. He accepted it because he did not want to hurt the blacksmith's feelings. He even told him on his deathbed that his meal had the greatest merit because it was the last meal for a Buddha. One of the reasons we didn't start this project earlier was because of the money it takes to make sandwiches and dinners. We spend around $300 a month to make 160 sandwiches, and we normally schedule the last Saturday of every month. Our various events fund our outreach projects, so we have a used book sale, a yard sale, bake sales, and other events. We also receive individual donations. The shelters also request travel-sized toiletries, so we ask our members for those donations. We had so much left over from the holidays and people's travels that we had one giant garbage bag filled with toiletries for the 3 shelters and the men's hotel. In 2017, we received a $5,000 grant from our national headquarters, Buddhist Churches of America, to help Sarah's Circle. We purchased them an ice maker, which they really wanted, and added another day per month to make sandwiches for about a year. We have a 1-gallon jar called Change for Hope, where people can toss in their loose change. After only 3 months, it is already full. We will take the change to a Jewel grocery store and convert it into Amazon gift cards to purchase underwear and toiletries. There is no fee for using this service at Jewel like they have at various banks. For the past 2 years, Sarah's Circle has hosted an interfaith breakfast at our temple where we discuss homelessness in Chicago. Networking with various groups opens up different avenues, and we share stories and ideas.
Thank you.
My name is Zaynab. Thank you for reading because it gave me an opportunity to think about what I was gonna say. By day, I am a doctoral student that works on Jewish and Islamic law, specifically with respect to issues of gender and ritual practice, and religious authority. By night, or I really should say what other hours in the day I have left after doing that, I balance my time between doing LGBT Muslim cultural work, Jewish-Muslim interfaith engagement, and combating anti-Blackness within Muslim communities. So that is what has been on my plate for the past 7 or so years at this point.
Thank you all so much for giving us just a glimpse into the kind of work that you all do. Our first question for each of you is, what within your faith tradition fuels and motivates you to do the work that you do? In particular, the work that you see as your justice-based work. Anyone can start. Uh-oh, do I have to be like, I was gonna say, because
I'll go, Mama.
all right. I was like, I taught classes, I know how to call them folks.
I think, I kind of just want to can I just double back to something that Sister Prejean said?
Absolutely.
You know, I kind of hear it. You said you had to tell that story of what you saw.
Right.
You had to do that. That's how I felt when I started my project. I saw a young man that had been murdered. And he was in a car. And he lived in a neighborhood. He lived in Inglewood. I was moving out of Inglewood into Hyde Park. And I was moving on up. And I see this boy. I see all these emergency vehicles. And I parked my car a few blocks away. I walk back. And the guy is in his car. And there are all of these mothers standing around. And we're all about the same age. And everybody was so angry. They weren't sad. They were angry. Because they were scared. Because everybody was on the phone calling their sons. Everybody was calling their sons. And they were like, you need to be here. You need to get home now. This is going on and that's going on. And they out here killing people. And I don't know where you're at. And one mother said, his insurance policy is paid up. Blew my mind. Blew my mind. Now, that day, the boy who was dead in that car, 3 hours before he got killed, he would have knocked on his neighbor's door to tell her son had just been murdered 2 blocks away. So all of this was going on in this one little area. All of this shooting was happening one day, one time. I heard nothing about that on the news. I didn't hear anything about it anywhere. And it's like, oh my goodness, like 3 people have been shot today and it's only 7 o'clock in like 5 blocks. No one's saying anything about this. And it was just heartbreaking that these mothers, this mother said his insurance policy is paid up. When did you emotionally divorce yourself from your son? When did you give him up? When? That all you could think about was, well, at least he has insurance. Because I can't save him, so at least he has insurance. And when I drove back home that day, that night, when I drove back and I realized I crossed Washington Park and I crossed into the other Chicago. And I started telling my kids what I just seen around our old house. And I realized that nobody in Hyde Park was telling a story like that but me. Because they didn't traverse those 2 worlds like I do. And I felt like somebody has to be the voice of the people inside of that bubble. Somebody has to say something. I gotta tell somebody about what's happening there. People have to know because people are dying and people are burying kids every day in that neighborhood and nobody is talking about it. Nobody's telling the real story about it. Nobody's talking about the people. They're talking about the situations, but not the people that live there, the human beings, the lives of the people there. Nobody's talking about it. And now in the work that we do every day, I look at it as 75th and Stewart, the corner that we sit on is a bubble. It's this bubble that nothing really gets into and nothing gets out of. And when we go there every day, we're in this bubble. And we try to bring as much of the world into the bubble. And I try to be the voice of the people in that bubble. I try to be their advocate because nobody listens to them. And I look at it honestly like, it's gonna sound crazy, but Horton hears a who. That's who it is. That's what it is. That's it. That's how I look at this. Horton hears a who. Have you ever heard of?
I just learned about that today about Horton. Archie just told me that.
Horton hears a who. You're a Horton, and so am I.
Wait, tell the people.
Horton hears a who. It's Dr. Seuss's. It's Dr. Seuss's best work ever. And it's about an elephant who hears these people on a dandelion. They live on a flower, and he's the only animal that can hear them. And all the rest of the animals think he's crazy, and they all want to take his flower, and they want to, especially the kangaroo. It's terrible. Kangaroos are terrible.
Oh, shit.
I'm sorry, Dr. Seuss said it. It was in the book. Look, some of my best friends are kangaroos, okay? But, like, so everybody wants to take this flower, and they all want to, and Horton is protecting this flower with his life because he's saying there's life in this flower. There's life on this flower. Their lives.
Person, no matter
How small, a person is a person, no, exactly, I see, it's one of your favorites as well. And it is, he's telling them, people live here, I gotta protect this, I gotta take care of these people. And you have to care about them too because they're here. That's how it is. It's us saying, people, you gotta see what's on this flower. You gotta hear these people. You gotta see what's going on in this room. You gotta hear the sounds that's happening in this room. And everybody is denied access to it, but you see it. And you have to get that, you have to tell that story. Just like I see what happens in that neighborhood, on that block, and in neighborhoods just like it every day. And it's like, no, I have to tell you the real story straight from the people that you don't hear, the people that you ignore. I hear those people.
Yeah.
I talk to those people. They listen to me and I listen to them, and now I have to tell you what they're saying because you don't want to hear them. But I hear them, and they're very real to me. And so it's really important. Like, I understood where you were coming from when you said that.
Yeah, let me ask you this. So,
I know what I gotta do when I come out from the execution chamber is, and it sounds impossible, but we have to change this in this country. We gotta wake people up. So what do you need from the community here? What needs to happen in the community to stop all these killings? How do we get engaged in citizens? Or you thought we never asked?
Thank you for that softball. Thank you so much. Okay, back to that question. What within your faith tradition fuels and motivates you to work for justice? Tikkun olam. I'm Jewish, and repairing the world
oh yeah.
is what it's about for me.
Healing
And
the world.
the
Talk about
way that people see it, it's an idea that the world, when the world was created, it cracked. It has cracks in it. And it's up to each individual, all of us, it's our job to perfect the world, to do our part in fixing it. And so the way, because of my upbringing and because of my education and because of, my way of life, I've always been, I understand it as when everybody else sees problems in society, I see cracks. And the thing is, if you have a crack in the roof of your house, you don't throw your house away, you get the crack fixed, and that's what you do. That's the way that I see the world. That's the way that I see gun violence. It's a crack. It's a crack. It's gonna take a lot of us, a whole lot of spackle. It's gonna take a lot of work, but we can fix it. It's still something that we have to try to fix. It's our job to do that. And so this is me with my putty knife and my putty, and I'm fixing a crack when I'm sitting on that corner.
Okay.
That's what I'm doing. This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to leave the world better than I found it. That's what I'm supposed to do. And if I wasn't supposed to do it, I would have never seen the crack. But I think to stop gun violence, we first have to understand violence in general. We have to understand what it's made up of, its composition. It's not just one thing. It's all of these different things that conspire to create gun violence. And in some neighborhoods, more components exist than in others. So that's why you see far more violence in impoverished neighborhoods with bad schools and food insecurity and all of, high levels of incarceration and no jobs. And that's why you see everybody getting killed there. In other neighborhoods, there may be some components, a couple here and there, but not as many, and that's why it's not as many shootings. So until you start to address each one of those, you're not gonna do anything about gun violence.
Come on.
If you don't look at gun violence as something that's more layered than what we're looking at it, it's never gonna work. That's why the police can't fix it. They can't do anything. You can hire as many of them as you want to, and eventually they become the problem.
Yeah.
So, until we start addressing the things that actually conspire to create it, we won't do anything about gun violence. So, I think from the community, what I need is for the community is to remember that our kids are our kids and they're people. They're people. And we have to communicate with them like people. And we have to remember that they're human beings. And we have to look at them. And we have to say, hey, you actually have value. You can't expect the kids to value somebody else's life when nobody values theirs.
Right.
So you have to make them feel valuable. And once they feel valuable, and once they feel important to somebody, they are far less likely to take a life.
Yes. So I like that you you talked about hearing people who are ignored, which I really appreciate because I think sometimes people say that people are voiceless, right? And it's not that they don't have voices, it's that people aren't listening. And you also talked about the layers of the issues that you see and how your beliefs help you see those things and the way you look at those things. And I'm wondering if we can, reframe the question a little bit. And I want to hear a little bit about how you all's faith allows you to see layers and how does it shape your view of what you're doing and how does it push you to see what you see and to do what you do.
I want to hear from these other people. Then they start off with just saying a few sentences. We ain't letting you get away with that. A few things.
Pick up that mic, Zaynab.
Okay. So in terms of layers and like what gets me out of bed in terms of like faith and activism, a lot of it admittedly started with Epic's dissatisfaction about the way that things were going, and it came from having to operate in multiple spaces at the same time. So on the one hand, you have LGBT Muslims in the Chicagoland area by virtue of generally how conservative the Muslim community is, that feel like they can't go anywhere, that do not have community when it comes to events or just like even in times of like opaque Islamophobia, and I say opaque because it was always there, whether who it was visible to, depends on how hard you were looking. On the other hand, you have Black Lives Matter popping off at the exact same time, and this internal conversation again within Muslim communities about, well, what is our responsibility to Black people? And you had Black Muslims like myself, like, you also have a responsibility to us too. This isn't just an outward facing event. And the thing that continues to get me out of bed in the morning is I'm a Sufi by initiation, and that doesn't mean that I sit around and read a bunch of like Rumi quotes on Facebook, because I know that's the popular perception of what it means to be a Sufi, and it deeply rakes me over the coals. And I'm specifically a Shisti, which is a lineage that comes out of first Afghanistan and winds up moving to North India. And one of the things that our founder, Muhyiddin Chisti, says in his last sermon is that you serve God through serving people so that I will be proud of you when it comes time to the final hour, which for us means when you go face your Lord at the end of your life and account for everything that you have done. And so if I'm not living into what it means to serve people, to serve God, then I'm not only living into my faith as a Muslim, I'm also not living into what it means to be a part of my Sufi order specifically. So that is what gets me out of bed every day and say like, okay, like you said, it's gonna have to change, and it has multiple layers, and sometimes the only way you see that those multiple layers is if you're in multiple spaces at the same time. Like you talked about traversing boundaries. I sit at the intersections of communities that quite frankly did not speak to each other until they had to deal with a queer Black woman in their face who's also a Muslim saying like, you can address it or you cannot address it, but life is gonna go on and we're gonna still keep doing what we're doing.
Can you just teach us a little bit more about Sufi, that it's more than quoting Rumi from the Facebook? Explain, teach us.
Okay, so I try so hard not to sound like an academic bitch and it never works out too well.
I want to learn. I want to learn.
So Sufis, kind of like some sects of Buddhism, have this concept of self-annihilation, which means you die before you die. And essentially it means that like you have to understand that your life is finite on earth, and that you're not going to live forever. And so knowing that you are going to die and contemplating the eventuality of your death, however that comes, gives you the space to then say, okay, how exactly do I want to live my life in relation to my covenant with God, my covenant with the community, and my covenant with the rest of the world. So for Sufis, we take that concept of self-annihilation in relation to justice very seriously, especially, I hate to put it this way, in times like right now, where the things that you might have to do in order to, say, resist Islamophobia might be the thing that ends your life or ends your freedom. And you have to have a real conversation with yourself about, like, am I really willing to turn up against white nationalists or white supremacists or an entire political administration just so people in my community can feel safe to walk down the street or go seek out medical services or whatever. Like, that takes a very hard internal conversation about what you are and you are not willing to do. And I have the personal bias that I feel like for those who don't practice self-annihilation, it's very obvious in the way that they address certain things within Muslim communities, because it's just like, it's not as layered as you would say, because people don't want to face the fact that they might die in the pursuit of justice. But that's an unfortunate eventuality that you have to deal with, whether you are fighting for justice or flipping hamburgers. Like, your life is going to end one way or another. How do you choose to make it meaningful as a reflection of your relationship with God?
Okay.
I just want to remind all our speakers to make sure you use the mic and make sure you point it right at your, there you go. Thank you.
So like this?
Yeah.
I know, it's really weird, but.
Well, as far as Buddhism and my working with the homeless, there are concepts such as compassion, which is feeling and concern for others. Wisdom is what we gain through experience. Empathy is understanding and sharing what others feel. Kindness is easier than being angry. Selflessness is when we put aside our own selfish desires and help others. And we should lose our ego, not put ourselves on pedestals or think we are doing good. Just do good and not think about the self. We should have gratitude for what we have and share with others, and we shouldn't take anything for granted. There is a reading that we say every Sunday that includes the line, "May I be kind and gentle to every living thing and protect all who are weaker than myself." This line is so easy to say, but much harder to live up to. We try to be kind by helping others. When we give someone food, we have a genuine desire to help others without expectation of anything in return. We do not give to feel good about ourselves or for merit.
You know, when I went to the block for the first time, Yom Kippur came around, the Day of Atonement, and I was fasting that day. But it was an unusually warm day in October. So I went to the block to barbecue. And every day we feed probably about 150 people. So I was there and kids were like, well, you're not supposed to be here. What are you doing here? And, you know, it's during the weekend. Well, it's Yom Kippur. I'm here. Because if I'm fasting and I'm feeding someone else, that's a mitzvah. So that's what I'm going to do. Let's start this year off right, because I'm going to have a whole lot to atone for next year. But yeah. So the kids were asking, why aren't you eating? People kept asking, why aren't you eating? You're not eating nothing? No, I'm not eating. I know you're not on a diet. You're already skinny enough. I'm not dieting. That's not what this is about. I'm like, I'm fasting. Well, what you like? What is that? What does that mean? And so we started having these conversations about why I was fasting, what I was fasting for. And we started having conversations about forgiveness, about what it means, what this relationship with God means. This whole forgiveness thing, like, wait, you don't have to die to be forgiven. And it's like, nope, there's a date every year. It's a book, it's a date.
Save the date.
like, those rollers of sand get wiped out. And the conversation in a neighborhood where so many people do so much stuff that society says is wrong, just to survive, they need forgiveness. They need it. They need to feel like they can have some sort of redemption, that's not beyond them. And it's kind of like, ever since we do Yom Kippur on the block now, we break the fast on the block, everybody does it with us. We're gonna do this together. Because another part of the Yom Kippur service is sorry, I gotta sneeze. Oh, sorry. It's a memorial service. So, for so many people in neighborhoods where so many people have died, where they've lost so many, it is a transformative idea for them to believe that they still have some sort of connection with their loved ones, especially when most of them were so young when they died. And they want to feel like they can still communicate with their brothers or their sisters or their mothers or their friends. They want to still feel that connection. So they really love the idea of talking about their loved ones, of lighting candles, of remembering. They love that. And we do this together every year, and we talk about our New Year's resolutions, if you will. And everybody wants to be better, and everybody wants to do something different because your slate just got wiped clean. What are you gonna do with this particular opportunity? You have a clean slate. How are you gonna change from last year? How are you gonna change? And that means something to them. They feel better, they're different, they're lighter, they're better. And I love the fact that I could use my Jewishness to influence my blackness. I could use the idea of Kol Yisrael Arabim Zeh Bazeh, all Israel for each other all the time, with black people. Jews were taught the idea of always being there for one another and rarely use it. Black people were not taught that, but we need it all the time. And so it really helped me to have these Jewish principles that I could apply to the black community because we needed them.
You rolled right into the next question, and I love it. And Zaynab, you talked a little bit earlier about doing Jewish and Muslim interfaith engagement. So I'm just wondering for all of you.
We've worked together before.
Yeah, I saw y'all figuring it out before we started. They had that moment where you go to an event and you look at somebody and you're like, ooh, I know you. But then you don't quite remember everything, but you gotta figure it out. They did that before we started, so this is actually perfect. If you all could talk a little bit about how interfaith and interspiritual collaboration comes up in your work and what that looks like. I'm imagining that everybody on the block who now does Yom Kippur with you, they aren't all Jewish, but
They also do Sukkot. They also do Passover.
Right.
They do.
Right.
I mean, everything. We do everything together.
Right, and I'm also imagining that at no point are you like checking people's cards at the door, like, are you? Right, so I just want to hear a little bit more and a little bit from all of you about like what that looks like in the work you do. Sister Helen, would you start for us this time?
I just want to say how glad I am to be here. It's so good to be in this community of women. I mean, really, thank you. So my faith, my Christian faith, I've become a nun, so I take faith seriously, become a Catholic nun, and valued highly prayer, service of the community, a nun that didn't beat kids with rulers, loved my 8th grade boys, just trying to even teach them semicolons and grammar. It's a challenge. Sometimes I say, death row, 8th grade boys, teaching them grammar. I don't know, it's a toss-up. I think it's more of a challenge. But anyway, so kindness and goodness and loving learning and loving to teach, which is why I joined the Sisters of St. Joseph, because I had fantastic teachers in high school. But then this Vatican II happened in the Catholic Church. It was the first time the Catholic Church had this big ecumenical council with leaders from all over the world. And it was not to condemn heresy in other people. It's the first time we actually had a gathering of the whole Catholic community to just say, how can we relate to the problems and struggles of the modern world? And nobody took that more seriously than the nuns in the church. Because women, I mean, we ain't got any privilege. I mean, it's such a clerical, patriarchal society in the Catholic Church where men have all the power. So the women, we took that bit in our teeth, the Vatican II, and transforming to reach out to the world. And I was part of that wave of the sisters. And justice then, instead of just charity and praying for people. Praying to God to change the world, rolling up your sleeves, getting engaged. And the more I learned about the gospel of Jesus, when he said things like, the kingdom of heaven is inside you, and empowering people in community to help make the kingdom of God come on earth. And so I began to learn that, and I learned that a lot in the black community in St. Thomas, because there were people hungry, so we're doing something. There was the tenant association, they had rats, and they didn't have the lights fixed. And because they're living in public housing, they're not paying any attention to them. So the first public march I was ever in was to be with the tenant association, asking for the help they needed to get the broken pipes fixed, the rats out, the lights on for safety. Just basic needs that people needed. So I'm not coming into the community to save anybody. If anybody's being saved, it's me by waking up and just being in solidarity with people in what they were doing. And in that I learned that a group of people, so my working word for justice is just us. Because it's not a stadium full of people all rushing out there saying, now we're going to go do social justice. It happens in little groups. And Jesus talked about that, about wheat coming up right next to the weeds. It's not, you just have a whole field of wheat and you got a whole field of weeds, and you got black and you got white, and you can separate it out. It all comes up together. But to be, no matter how small the action, that when I acted, I did something. I felt the freedom that came from acting. The paralysis came from not acting, from just seeing all the problems and just being overwhelmed, not knowing what to do. So by witnessing the execution of a human being who was the Son of God, because people are worth more than the worst thing they've ever done in their life. He had done an unbelievably bad thing, but then I met him and I could see his humanness. I said, oh my God, he's a human being. And I began to learn from him as well. And then to see his death, just step by step, a scripted death. Here the guards, here they come, here they're walking in, here they're strapping him in the chair, here's the warden nodding his head, here's the executioner now being paid $400 to pull that switch and electrocute that man and call it legal. It's legal. It's the law to do this. And knowing that the people were never going to get close, knowing they'd never see it. And so Jesus and the compassion, and I tell you, standing outside those prison gates that night after Patrick Sonia had been executed, two things happened inside of me after I threw up. You got to throw up. I mean, a clean slate kind of stuff. Because of what you're seeing, you know. One was, it's a secret ritual, and I've been a witness, so I got to be the one. I can't walk away from it. I got to be the one. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know I was going to write a book. I'd never written a book before, you did me. That book got leached out of me. Sometimes books write themselves or something. And it's hard work, but I mean, it's like, I've got to do something. I got to serve this. I know this story, so I got to do this. And the other thing was, when I thought of the American people, and I knew that 90% of Louisiana people, the Deep South people, are all for the death penalty. And when the book came out in '93, 80% of the American public was for the death penalty. So here comes a little book written by a Catholic nun on the death penalty. Like, what chance does that book have? Like that little bitty Rolade in that great big stomach where all that acid. I mean, what? But that's the kind of stuff Jesus talked about, and that's the kind of stuff of the little mustard seed, or the little grain of wheat, or the little bitty, but it's got integrity to it and has power in it, right? And so the other thing I thought of outside those gates was the goodness of the American people. And that there was a statement about Jesus that when he spoke to the crowds, he had compassion. Because they were like, well, they use the image of the day, sheep without a shepherd. And it's not that people are bad. And they say, yeah, execute people. They've been made to be afraid by politicians. And that this is the only thing we can do. But if they get educated, and Thurgood Marshall on the Supreme Court, we call it the Marshall Hypothesis. He's the first black man on the Supreme Court. And he said, they say that the American people support the death penalty. If you educate them, bring them close, and help them see what the death penalty really is, they will not support the death penalty. And so I began, and people would ask me, how long you think before, and I didn't know, however long it takes. You don't have, well, if it's done in 10 years, I'll do the work. You just get in there, like Gandhi said. You do what you do because of the integrity of it. You cannot not do it. You know, and you have to do it. It's the moral imperative. I do it because it's right, because I've been, what I've witnessed and what I've seen, I know I gotta do this. And that's kind of, faith is, like the reading just the other day from Isaiah was, behold, I make all things new. See, I'm creating something new. And it's that freshness, that newness that we come to every day. That no matter what the day before has been, and how maybe it felt boring, or maybe when we went to sleep we didn't feel we accomplished very much. There's a freshness and newness to life that comes from faith, whether or not we belong to a religion or not. A good friend of mine is an atheist, and she believes all life is connected. And I work closely with her. And it just means, atheist means against the theism of the day. And God knows, look what's happening with religion when you have Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General of the United States, quoting Romans 13 from the New Testament, St. Paul, to justify separating mothers from their children at the border. And you know what that argument is that they use in Romans 13? And just see how religion's being used, how Christianity's being used, is to say, well, God is the authority behind civil authority. So if authority makes a rule, a law, then you obey it and you obey God. So when the law of the land was slavery, and you couldn't teach a slave to read or to swim, you're obeying God because you're obeying the law. You always have to look at law and see if it's according to love, compassion, justice, or not. And I hate to see how Christianity is being used by people, by politicians, that they quote selectively from the Bible to be able to justify the utmost cruelty of separating parents from their children. They didn't even take notes. They didn't even track what the child's name was, where the parents were. We don't know if those children will ever be united with their parents again. And so that humanness in us, that capacity for compassion, we go, that is wrong. And so part of what faith in me, faith in all good human beings is, that we get in there then and we do something. We do not let that happen, continue to happen without resistance of some kind. And social media gives us one handle: sign this petition, be part of this. That each one of those actions, I believe, is part of expressing what we believe in, who we are. I love joy and how you make the sandwiches, what goes into the sandwiches, all those concrete acts of love and kindness and compassion. I mean, just all those things. We're just ordinary human beings, right? We just do what we can, right? You want to tell us any more?
Well, when we first started handing out sandwiches at the Tent City on Roosevelt, one woman went to the gas station next to the encampment and came back with bottles of flavored iced tea that she said was left there. She handed one to me, but I said she should keep it, thinking of course that she needed it more than me. Afterwards, I regretted my decision because it is just as important for us to accept gifts as it is to give them, to show acknowledgement of the compassion of another human being who wants to return a kindness given to them. So I learned a lesson from her. Deep listening is part of Buddhism, and we can learn lessons from anyone. We accept these lessons with gratitude and humility. There's a new concept called engaged Buddhism, which is reaching out to others in our community and becoming engaged with them. In our sect, Jodo Shinshu, we do not meditate, but we try to be mindful and aware. Listening to people's stories and the human connection was what drew me in.
Thank you.
So I actually like that you mentioned engaged Buddhism because that gives me a segue in. So I used to do a lot of interfaith, admittedly most of my interfaith engagement work used to take place in Europe. And 2015 was the last time that I went on a specifically interfaith trip, and it was ironically with the Zen Peacemakers.
Oh,
And it was when it was like Bernie Glassman's last trip before he passed away, like as of last year. And I'm trying to think where I was trying to go with that. I hold that memory fondly of being able to experience engaged Buddhism because we were doing the Zen Peacemakers Bearing Witness retreat at Auschwitz. And that was the second time I had gone. The first time I went was for study abroad as an undergrad, and I felt like I had unfinished business spiritually. And so when I saw that opportunity, I was like, you know what? I'm not a meditator, but I'm gonna give it a shot for a week, like in a place that I spent a lot of time in, like years ago. And I say all of that to say that like I've had to put traveling overseas in that way on the back burner, namely by virtue of this administration. I can't guarantee that I can come in and out of the country without being stopped at the border. And even though like I'm a Black American and I was born here, my passport still has an Arabic name. I may not walk around in a full hijab all the time anymore. I mostly wear a turban, but I don't want to have to call my parents from say like New York City and say like, hey, I'm in a detention center. Can you like hop on a plane and come get me? Because they don't seem to believe that like I was doing Jewish-Muslim interfaith engagement in Berlin or like Poland or wherever. And the odd thing about that is that even before Trump took power, the last time I was in Poland, I landed, I think, a week after their parliament election when they had begun to institute a more far-right parliament. And this was like a couple years before their parliament attempted to pass legislation that denied their complicity in the Holocaust altogether, which is heinously ironic considering they have the most famous concentration camp like after Dachau, but you know, like there it is. I think about how that specter of white nationalism has kind of haunted me every time I've done interfaith engagement overseas, and currently in the wake of everything that goes on, I feel like the work that I do within Muslim communities and other people is having to be really intentional about saying like, listen, we get that you want to like stop the Muslim ban or stop the Muslim registry, but if you don't actually understand like say surveillance, for example, and how that works structurally, you're not going to be of any use to us. Like in the wake of the first Muslim ban, I had come back from New York City to do a Muslim women's leadership retreat. And that decision actually came down on the last day of that retreat, and we're all just sitting in a room. And you had people who were sitting there like, I don't know how I'm going to get home, because people had come from overseas, people are on visas from like different parts of the country and living in different parts of the United States. And I come back to Chicago and go back to like working at Masjid al-Rabia, and we had a lot of interesting requests from people who were like, so can we register in place of like you guys? And we were just like, wait, what? Like, what do you mean register? And they were like, so we can like register as Muslims. And it was just a room of us, like, how do we explain to people that, like, by virtue of the way surveillance works, that's just not even possible? Like, I'm pretty sure the government knows who's a Muslim, who's not a Muslim. Like, I don't think you can walk up to, like, Federal Plaza and say, like, hey, you know, I know my name, I may look like my name is Joe, but actually my name is Ahmed, and I'm here to sign up for, like, the Muslim registry. Like, that doesn't work, right? So the way we do interfaith engagement is just really sitting people down and saying, like, listen, these are the issues that affect our community, and we just, because of how vulnerable it is, we're just not in a place to like entertain surface level engagement. Like, it's too dangerous and it's too precarious given the different types of people that we have in our community. And that has brought along really wonderful collaborations, and other people just like, you mean I can't wear a safety pin? And I'm just like, okay. Like, you could wear a safety pin. I have one on right now. It doesn't do anything. However.
Wait, what you mean, wear a safety pin?
So there was, oh boy, I'm trying to remember this whole moment. So like, there was this whole moment in allyship where it was like, if you wear a safety pin, then that's supposedly how people are supposed to know that you're a safe person.
Right, and it got a lot of criticism for a few reasons. The first was, most of the time, signs and symbols like that aren't supposed to be public.
Yeah.
Because again, Zaynab's talking about surveillance, right? Like, for example, I know one thing that's been a challenge with some Christian churches in cities where they've been advocating for and hiding and housing people who are under the threat of being deported, is that, you know, sometimes the ways in which we do that publicly is like the opposite, right? Like, I read an article once about a church in another state doing that, and they were like, oh, the new Underground Railroad, and I was like, you missed a key word.
You missed the plot.
The word is underground. And so the safety pin thing was like this way for people to say, you know, if you meet a stranger in the street, then you see them with a safety pin and you know that there's someone you can be safe with. But that defeats the purpose in a lot of ways of safety, because if you have an outward symbol and everyone on the internet knows what it means, then the people around you aren't safe, because you've given a symbol to people who surveil to know exactly what you're doing and anyone associated with you. And because it's this, and like you said, it's surface level, right? It's this idea that, like, look at me, I'm a safe person, and to be and create safety, not safe space when we talk about conversations, but literal physical safety takes work.
Yeah, it does.
Like real work, you know, like Zaynab is talking about the challenge of having people who want to help but don't realize that the type of help they might want to give might not be the type of help that people really need. And so that was the safety pin thing was very frustrating, especially since there were a lot of people around the same time that I noticed that were like, no, here's how you can really help.
Yeah.
Like, here's a list of, like, a whole archive of organizations and people and way, like, seriously, like, one of our good friends did this, like, pulled together a way of that you can help people, and people still wanted to just wear a safety pin instead.
Yeah, and it was mind-blowing only because, I don't know, I guess because I live with the recognition that, like, surveillance and white nationalism are things, it is really hard in a moment of crisis to sit really well meeting people down and say, like, listen, I get you want to be, like, supportive in this moment, however, you have to move carefully. Like, not everything is going to be broadcast on, like, PBS by Linda Eller, you know? Like, Muslim communities are made up of people who are undocumented, who are surveilled by federal agencies, by local law enforcement, who may not want to interact with a lot of things, and you blasting it 5 million ways to Sunday is just not helpful.
Right.
To anybody. Like, if you can't understand the vulnerability and the risk that's involved, it complicates the ability to do real, meaningful interfaith engagement. And ultimately, what a lot of us wound up doing is we wound up partnering with not only like queer Jews and queer Christians, but like folks who had no compunction about like being in like anti-fascist resistance while also being people of faith. Like I've watched a lot of those alliances form like slowly around the country, where it's like Muju in New York City, for example, who straight up marched against like Nazis in the heart of New York City, and they were willing to do things that like the people who were literally knocking down our doorstep like just could not conceptualize. And I'll end with this, like I think the complex thing about being in solidarity with Muslims is not only that it's surface level, but there are things that have become sexy, like safety pins or like human chains around mosques, for example, and no one stops to think like, no biker gang is going to like attack you when there's a human chain around a mosque. Like that stuff happens when everybody has gone home for the day. So, and if you can't conceptualize that because it just feels so good to form that human chain for a day, you're not doing us any favors. At the end of the day, you're making our job a lot harder, because then we have to start from zero every time we have those interactions, as opposed to constantly building with people and saying, what does safety look like for your community? What does safety look like for our community? Can we meet somewhere in the middle here and work this thing out for the long term, not just the short term?
I understand where you're coming from, completely and totally. It really grinds my gears that people complain so much about the violence in Chicago, but all they're willing to do is march twice a year. Violence happens every day, every single day in this city. So it takes more than a march or a peace circle here and a peace circle there sometimes to actually fight it. You have to be as persistent as the violence is. And people just aren't there. They aren't. And I mean, that like button on Facebook is one hell of a drug. It is. Because the like button on Facebook.
Where you can like
Yeah, because people really feel like they're doing something when they like something. If you're saying, hey, we need you to come out and we're gonna do this, we're gonna do a pop-up here, we're gonna go sit on this block, we're gonna do this, they'll like it. They'll congratulate you on your great work and everything. I don't want you to congratulate me, I want you to get out here with me. I don't need a congratulations, I don't need that, that's not what this is about. But still, they feel like they're doing something because they liked it. They're conscious because they liked it. That really bothers me. And it takes all of these, what it does is people have this idea about activists, who activists are. So when somebody is killed or something happens, nobody has to do anything because the activists, they're gonna show up and they're gonna take care of it. Instead of us all being active and us all being activists, we're not doing that. And it really, we need to be far more invested in that. People complain so much. You look at social media and you can kind of gauge what people are saying. And, you know, come Wednesday, everybody's not outraged about all of the murders that happened last weekend. But Friday, everybody is going out and they're looking forward to the weekend. They forgot 8 people just got shot at a baby shower last weekend. What do you think is going to happen on Saturday? So Monday comes back around and everybody is like, Chicago's too violent and I'm moving away. But this happens every week. By Wednesday, once again, you forgot because you're looking forward to the weekend and you forgot what the weekend brings in the city. And so people, there's no real follow through. There's no real stick with it. There's no real investment in it. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe you guys too, but I feel like with I don't even think it's just Judaism. I think it's just religion, period. I think it's coming outside of the walls. It's starting to be more active. It's starting to be in the streets. It's starting to be, you're finding it in different places. It's not locked up, you know, in these walls anymore. I think that's the way it's supposed to go. I think it was always supposed to be like that. You know, we have all the answers at Temple. When we're at synagogue, there are all these answers. We're all great people, and we're all super great and super nice to everybody else. How about we take this show on the road? You know, like, let's do this out there. if we believe that all of this works, let's go test it out in the real world. If you really trust God, what did God say? If God said we can do this, let's go do it. Let's not just be these people amongst each other. Let's take this against the world and see how what we have, how it can influence people in the world, how it changes people in the world. And it's almost like faith just unchained when you're out there and you're sharing all of these things. You're sharing all of this goodness that you do get from faith and this newness that you get. It transforms the people that you're around. And so I do feel like that kind of influence is so greatly needed in the world. It can help with the follow through. We just don't have enough of those people to actually do it. It's just not enough.
I would say it's not simply that we don't have enough people, but it's also that the paradigm for how people understand religious activism is changing. And I say that because it's like part of my research and thinking about like what it means for people who are essentially not men to assume religious authority and like the complex implications of actualizing that in like public religious space. And oftentimes, whether it's in my research or just like on a day-to-day basis, I hear people talk about like the crisis of authority, like we don't know who to follow or we don't know who to guide us. And I have to sit there and say like, you know, most religious traditions for the longest time didn't operate on the principle of the Joel Osteens of the world. Right. You know, like, and even that sort of setting functioned in a very different way than it currently does today. So when you say like religion unchained, what I think people are starting to realize is that I could sit and wait for Joel Osteen to realize that like his notion of prosperity gospel is bankrupt, or I could actually go feed people, or save people, or stop the death penalty. Because if I wait on Joel Osteen, a whole lot of people are gonna starve, a whole lot of people are gonna die, and a whole lot more people are gonna get killed. Like, people are starting to see the urgency and realizing that, you know, you don't have to have like matriculated through, not that I think he did anyway, but like, you don't have to like go to seminary or have all these letters behind your name to do something. And you also don't have to wait for people who, in my personal opinion, have made it quite clear that they were never going to do anything in the first place.
So I love that, you know, Sister Helen, you said we're just ordinary people. Right. And you said it last night. You said, don't wait for, you know, who am I going to follow? And you said that people always like wait for the activists to do it. And so you were talking about how your entire congregation gets involved. Sister Helen, you've talked about this, and it was in the documentary we saw last night, about, you know, that wave of women, right? That, you know, we have 4 individual people sitting here, but that represent a much larger contingency of communities that care about the work that they're doing. And, you know, they've all shared that they didn't always do what they're doing. They came to it in different ways. And so I just kind of want to lift that up because, you know, we've got a lot of students in the room. And I don't know about y'all, when I was in college, I was trying to figure out what I thought, what I believed, and what I was going to do with it. And what, do you hear me? And whether or not I believed everything I've been taught my whole life, whether or not I believed what people were saying to me in class, whether or not I believed what people were saying to me out on the quad, whether or not I could do anything, whether or not I could do anything and graduate, right? All of that. Listen, the realist. And so I was just wondering if you all could talk a little bit about how both your faith and your work have evolved over time, right? Like, you all kind of mentioned it, but if there's something in particular, Sister Helen, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of really want you to tell the story of the woman you heard talking about social justice, selfishly. And just a little bit about, you know, what that was like for you, having your faith and your work evolve, and maybe a time where you were like, what am I doing? and how, and a little bit more in detail about how you got there. I mean, you talked, Tamar, you talked about seeing this and not hearing people talk about it really moved you to act. And you talked about how your faith helped you see that. And I'm just wondering, like, what about before that? Like, what got you to the point that you could be sparked in the first place, right? Like, it's not always a one-off epiphany kind of thing. There are things that build and grow over time to get you to that point. So I'm wondering if you all can talk a little bit about that.
Okay, you go first.
Don't worry, I'll go. It was motherhood, me being a mother. And my kids went to Jewish day school. And they were only black kids in Jewish day school, of course. And I wanted them to live this life that I didn't live. I mean, like, I grew up in Inglewood, but I went to Jewish day school in Hyde Park. So I was always somewhere in between these two worlds. And I wanted them to live this life in Hyde Park that it wasn't poverty, it wasn't dirty, it wasn't broken windows, it wasn't drugs, it wasn't any of that. It was Shangri-La. It was just utopia there. You know, like, I mean, there were people, when I was growing up, the kids on my block couldn't believe that people, like, in Hyde Park just had dogs. Like dogs, like little dogs, like, they don't protect your house. It's not like a pit bull or a Rottweiler. Right. Like, they have like a dog that like hangs out with the family. Like, people couldn't know really just regular little dogs. Like, yeah, look, like, who needs that in Inglewood? Yeah, it was crazy. But I wanted my kids to have this life that I thought that they should have, the life that I thought I always wanted. But there was a moment when my son was 13, and we were at the tailor getting his suit cut for his bar mitzvah. And we were watching the news while we were there, and 2 boys were shot on the west side. One of them was 14, and the other one was 17. And here I am, getting a suit for my son to wear for his bar mitzvah, and there's some mother who looks just like me, and her son looks just like my son, picking out a suit for his funeral. But still, it still didn't even really hit me then, because hey, my son's this good Jewish boy, and good Jewish kids don't get murdered. And my daughter one day gave me a call. I was at the nail shop, and my manicurist at that time, you know, she would charge you $10 if you were late 10 minutes. It went up like $5 for like every 10 minutes. Yes, it was rough. And so, like, I mean, I got plenty of speeding tickets trying to beat that 10 minutes. So when I got there, I was so upset I was late because there was a body in the street in the direction that I was going on the way there. And I was so upset that there was this body in the street because I'm gonna be late. Now the traffic is being rerouted. This is crazy, right? Get there, I'm sitting down, my daughter calls, and my daughter is crying. And she says, "Mommy, they just killed my friend." And I'm like, "They killed your friend?" And she's like, I said, "Where?" And she said, "On 51st and King Drive." That was the body in the street. And the part that got me though, that changed my life forever. She said, "Mom, he waits at the bus stop with me every day when I go to work." She was off of work that day, and he got killed at the bus stop. And I knew God is trying to tell you something. Because if that was the day before, or if it was the next day, my daughter would have been at that bus stop. And I would have been upset because there would have been 2 bodies under those sheets, and one of them would have been my daughter, and I wouldn't have even known it. That changed it. That changed me. Because if my daughter is saying, "Mommy, you have to do something," if she says you have to do something. Now, I don't know how moms stop bullets and stop gun violence in Chicago, but if growing up in this way of life and having this faith teaches me that I do have to try to do something. And if my daughter, who is the most selfish person on the planet, the most self-absorbed, I'm sorry, I mean, it's like my best friends. We're friends, you're not gonna tell her. No one's gonna tell her. But
You love her, obviously.
she's one of my favorite people. And her birthday was actually yesterday, but for her to feel like I care enough
that I have to do something. And even her doing something was telling her mom, you have to do something to fix this. I realized that it didn't matter that my kids were Jewish. It was in our house. When your kids have friends who are being murdered, it's in your house and it's coming for you. And it's only a matter of time if you don't do something about it. And that scared me to death. And from that day on, I was thinking, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And then Hadia Pendleton was murdered. Hadia Pendleton went to another school in our neighborhood. She went to the other school in Hyde Park. My daughter went to one and she went to the other. They were acquaintances. And when I saw Hadia's mother on TV, it was like looking at myself. I was looking at this mother, about the same age. Once again, she looks like me. Same neighborhood. We probably shop at the same supermarket. We might go to the same manicurist who charges us $10 if we're late. We might. We are the same kinds of people. And this happened to her daughter. So if this can happen to her daughter, it can happen to mine. And so I had to do something. It didn't matter, just something. Something had to be done. And just getting out there that first day on the block and cooking dinner, because teenagers are broke and always hungry. So free food, they love it. Who knew free food can save lives? Who knew? You feed them and everybody's sleepy and they'll go home and don't get killed. It works, right? But it just started off we were only supposed to be there for a few days, but then we became a part of the community. Just, part of the fabric of the community, of everybody's mom, everybody's aunt, everybody's sister, everybody's cousin. We just became a part of that. And it was supposed to be for a few days, but then it became every day. And it was just gonna be that summer, but then it became the next summer. Then it was gonna be on this corner, but then it was on that corner too. It keeps getting bigger and bigger because they need us. They need us. They need the sensitivity that we bring to their issues. They need the hope that we bring to these very dark places. They need us.
It's everything.
Well, my little waking up moment in perfect safety without children being killed was just coming to understand about the gospel and what I was called to do. I mean, I've realized more and more now, especially living in the African American community, became my teacher, just how much privilege just cushions you. It's just all you know. I mean, you have a successful father. We had money in the bank. We just had to fill out checks when I was in high school. Never wanted for anything. Just really encountering people in struggle. And there's a guilt that comes with realizing all you've had and kind of taking it for granted and being up against people who are losing their children. I mean, I barely was in St. Thomas for a week. And two of us, the sisters we were the only white people in the community. And I was safe. When I get to St. Thomas, I was safe. Because the people knew who we were. If I'd go to other housing projects, I would feel so safe. But in St. Thomas, we were community, they knew who we were, and we were barely there a week and watched an argument, just right out on the sidewalk. And one of the young men went up, got a gun, it was over sunglasses. Bang, bang, bang. And then there's Daniel bleeding to death on the sidewalk, and he's dead. And the police cars come. And the kids gather around because that's their drama. Hey, there's been a shooting, and all the kids are there. And just seeing that, it was just a world I just didn't know existed, and I didn't know what I was going to do. But the waking up moment had to do with understanding about the words of Jesus, like meditating on the scriptures and meditating and praying is all a good thing. But it was to make that connection between that meditation and those words and real life. And it meant getting out of the bubble. And so when our sisters were having a debate what Vatican II meant, what it meant to get out into the world, do justice, I was more like the charity compass. Just be kind to the people around you, don't be mean to people and stuff. But justice, I don't know what to do with justice. And this nun gave a talk. And So I can remember the line, and I think this is about our awakening and how we talk about grace, that when we awaken at a very deep level spiritually, and we know we awaken because it changes the trajectory of our lives. We begin to act differently, so we know. And so here was this nun talking about social justice, and the line she said was, Jesus preached good news to the poor. And I'd always thought, well, the good news to the poor that Jesus revealed was how much God loves us. Every hair of our head is numbered. God is so close, you can call God like Daddy, Abba, not just this justice God. And she said, integral to good news to people who are poor is that you can be poor no longer. That poverty wasn't God's will. That poverty was wrong. Poverty came from policies. Justice came poverty came because of decisions people were making, the way you do the economy and the tax cuts and the whole bit. So I think part of my resistance for so long to being a person of justice was, I had to get involved in all that stuff. And so I had to read, and I had to critique, and I had to belong to groups that intellectually you got to deal with it, the issues, and to get involved. But when she said that line, integral to good news is that poor people will be poor no longer. The only way that ever gets answered is through community. And I remember thinking, I don't even know any really poor people. And that's what led to my leaving the suburbs of New Orleans and moving in among African American people and basically saying, teach me. And they were compassionate and they were kind. That black people are still teaching white people about racism. They are kind to do that, right?
I'm sorry.
No. Say it, sister. Go ahead. No, it truly. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You on. Go ahead. You put your head down on the table.
Grad school fatigue is a real thing. I like how we turned it into what was our awakening moment. I think I had always been doing queer work. I've been out since I was like 14 and using my mother's house as a guerrilla meeting place during the Bush, when you're in high school during the Bush administration, and there are things you cannot do on campus. Yeah. I just said, we'll just meet in my mom's living room, it'll be fine. She ain't coming home till 6 o'clock anyway. So my queer organizing had always been very secular and very much about providing people with a space that they might not have at school or at home to be themselves. And I went away to college, 2012 rolled around, and I don't exactly remember where I saw it, but I saw an article about Muslims who were working on HIV prevention. And at the same time, I was taking classes on HIV virology and the sociology of AIDS. And it was written by the person who inevitably becomes my late sheikh of my order. And I emailed him and I said, do you really mean to tell me that there are Muslims who turn up for justice like this regularly? Wait, how do I get involved with this? And we just had this ongoing email chain, and he invites me out to Star King School for the Ministry, ironically enough, during Yom Kippur. So I dropped into the middle of a Sufi, oh my God, what do they call themselves out there? Because it's a very specific Jewish renewal community in the Bay Area where my sheikh's son is playing the cello and people are whirling around this synagogue as my sheikh is chanting. And I was just like, oh yeah, I want in on this. Now I didn't wind up going to Star King because when I say I'm very Midwest and I don't understand the price of housing on either coast,
Come on.
I just don't. And the thought of going into that much debt to live in a box was just deeply unsexy to me. And I was like, no, I'm sorry. Like, I can't do this. But it did give me, that was the beginning of being able to see other Muslims in social justice spaces. Like, I don't think it's an accident that after that, I went to a conference to honor the work of Amin Wadud, who was like a very well-known Black Muslim theologian, and one of the presenters was a Muslim prison chaplain who, before he even started his presentation, flips the hood on his robe, on his stove, which is like the Muslim male version of an abaya, right? In honor of Trayvon Martin, because that was all happening at the same time. And all the Black Muslim women, including myself, just broke down because he brought that into that space and that very visible connection between those things in that space. And ever since, I literally switched part of my major at the time. I had been doing historical anti-Semitism and really thought that that's what I was going to do, but there's something really soul-killing about spending the majority of your life traipsing through concentration camps. And I was just like, I just can't spiritually do this anymore. So like 2012 for me was that year where I was like, yes, I can work through faith and it doesn't have to kill my soul in the process of doing so.
Well, I didn't really have an awakening. We would just discuss homelessness at meetings, and really nobody did anything, and we would just walk away and say, yeah, we should help the homeless. And so a group of us went to Lower Wacker Drive, and we took some chili to them one year. It was around the holidays. And we just, doing that just made me feel like we needed to do more. And so I started just Googling homeless shelters, and I found Sarah Circle, and then I found the men's shelter on Lawrence. And it just started the ball rolling, and it's become a thing now in our temple. And I was kind of surprised actually that our board approved it, because we don't usually do that kind of thing. And we even had an Eastern District conference at our temple, which included temples from other districts, such as Washington, D.C., New York, and even Toronto, Canada. And we all, like 200 people, were making sandwiches just so everybody could experience this. And we went, a lot of them went to the shelters with us. And hopefully one day they will start doing the same thing in their cities.
So Zaynab, you actually said something that's an excellent segue into our last discussion question. You said that part of your transition in your work was a realization that for your own soul, you couldn't do the work that you were doing anymore, that spiritually for you, that was not what you needed to be doing. And so our last question is, we titled this program Fueled by Faith. And so I just would like each of you to talk a little bit about how you refuel for your own personal well-being, and what ways you strike a healthy balance or attempt to strike a healthy balance between your own wellness, your work, your life, your families, the things you do in addition to and even overlapping with the work that you do. Knowing the reality that there aren't always these clear lines of like, this is my activist box, and I do these things on Tuesday, and on Wednesday it's family day, and I forget, right? You talked about how just spending time with your son helped open your mind and your heart to do something about it. So there's so much overlap, and with all of that overlap, how do you all stay well and keep going?
Oh, don't start with me.
Why are you looking
All right, so admittedly, I used to burn rubber to the road, and I would not stop and think about my own wellness, I would travel internationally multiple times a year, which I didn't stop to think is really hard on your body in ways that you take for granted because you're just like, oh, I'm just getting out of this country for a little while, it's not a big deal. And then when Pulse happened, and I woke up one morning and I just could not walk without feeling glass shooting down my body. And I called one of my partners and I was like, I literally can't get to this meeting that I've been invited to like 4 hours ago about Pulse because I can't walk to the bus stop.
What's Pulse?
Like the Pulse shooting in Orlando, Florida.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And from there, it was just a admittedly slow decline of my health to the point where I had to say, like, I have to take a break from going from the classroom to meetings to whatever else people are emailing me about, to the point where I don't see my house what feels like for more than a couple hours at a time. And I take things a lot more slowly than I used to because I have to. Like, I can't move at the speed of light in the way that I think, like you said, people just expect the activists to show up, but no one stops to think about, like, we're burnt out, we're sick, we're tired, and when was the last time, like, we ate something that, like, wasn't microwavable, you know? And that, like, that moment has really, that, and between that and trying to navigate getting healthcare in our current clusterfuck of an opioid crisis, and also people trying to take away insurance, has made me say, like, listen, I really want to go to this meeting. I'm also in physical therapy now twice a week so that I can walk to that meeting another day. And that's not something that I would have taken seriously 7 years ago, but when it hits you, you just either have to go with it or it'll kill you, quite honestly. And I've watched that happen. I've lost people that I really cared about who were burning both ends of the candle and did not stop to think about their own well-being. And when you start losing people one after the other, you just, at some point you have to say to yourself, how is that not going to be me? I don't want to be the person who my friends and my family have to memorialize at some point.
Want me to go down? Well, actually, a lot of people ask me, how do I do all the stuff that I do? And I don't know how to answer. I just do stuff. But the way that I kind of relax is we watch a lot of movies on TV and we watch a lot of TV shows. And, we go out to dinner once in a while. I work on this stuff when I'm watching TV, so I think keeping your mind or concentrating on something else, reading books, watching movies, watching TV is a change of pace, and it gets you away from your other interests, and it can get to be too much.
Roxy,
It's gonna be you and me.
The way she turned to you.
I
think I like that.
there we go. You are quickly becoming one of my favorite people. I don't know. I don't know anything about a healthy balance. I haven't relaxed since 1995. I don't know. I quit my job every day, and then I wake up in the morning and I'm all refreshed refreshed again. And God just does it. And everybody is always like, hey, you need to practice self-care. And you need to get some rest. And you need to, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do it. That's what's gonna happen. You should unplug. You should just turn your phone off. And I'm just like, okay, I've just learned to say, okay, I'm gonna do that. I say all the time, I'm gonna do that. I'm putting that on the list, on my to-do list. I don't know. And I mean, I'm old, stuff hurts. My body is breaking down. It is. Nobody believes me though. It's happening. It is happening. I just push past it. There are so many other things. It's so urgent for me. Like what I do is so urgent. Like I feel like the work that I do is actually what keeps my kids alive. So God fortifies me, gives me the strength to do it. And as long as I have the strength to do it, I do it. But, oh, it is, my God, I mean, like I go months without cooking. I mean, but the beauty of it is like my family works with me. Like this is our work. We all kind of do this together. My son cooks every single day on the block. I'm not allowed to touch a barbecue grill because I burn everything up. Everybody knows I can cook. But he does it. That is his contribution. It's important for him to be there. He is a really great influence on the little boys. He's a role model. Like they love him. And that's what he does. That's his contribution. He doesn't talk to anybody and he cooks. That's his thing. And we all love him for that. And like, you know, I think when I'm there, I try to make it feel as much like home as I can. So that it doesn't feel like I'm sitting on a corner in Inglewood, you know, constantly jumping every time I hear a car backfire or something like that. So my anxiety level isn't that high. I mean, like, I love karaoke. We do a lot of karaoke on the block. Lots and lots of it. I am the champ.
You got a bit of a song you do?
Anything by Aretha Franklin. Hey! Anything.
Sorry, I'm from Detroit, y'all, I'm sorry.
So, it is anything. So, it is, I mean, like, we play games, we do all sorts of stuff to make it feel more like something you would want to do with your family at home. So, we've kind of built community around the idea of this being everybody's living room. So, like, that's super important, being able to create that kind of atmosphere. So it doesn't feel like, you know, it's 100 degrees and I've been sitting on the corner outside in Chicago for 5 hours. You know, like, it doesn't feel like that. It just feels like I was outside with the kids, somebody had to watch them. So I went and sat and watched the kids play. It has to feel normal. It has to feel like it's part of my life. Not just something that I do, but something that I am. So, and also once a year, I go back home. I go to Mississippi once a year. I don't miss it. Like I gather all my strength from there, from the ancestors, from the nature, from the everything. Just everything there is quiet, and it's a place where I can go where my phone doesn't work. Like I don't have to turn my phone off because there's a guilt about turning my phone off. But when I'm in the country, my phone doesn't work. So technically, I didn't turn it off, it just doesn't work. So it is the idea of me being able to get out of my car and walk a couple miles. It's the idea of sitting on the front porch and literally watching the sunset or even watching the sun come up. It's just, there are no sirens. There's nothing there that reminds me of Chicago, that reminds me of the block, that reminds me of the city, nothing. And so it's an escape. So I make sure no matter what happens, I'm going. If any chance that I get, I have a lot of family there. If it's a funeral, a wedding, a bar mitzvah, you lost a tooth, the baby lost a tooth, I'm on my way. I mean, anything that's going on, birthday parties, I'm going. Because I look for those little escapes, those mini vacations. I mean, I can't travel internationally right now. I don't know. I mean, with this administration, I might not be able to get back in. So I'm not going nowhere for a while. But I can definitely get in my car and I can go, I can hop in, do a 10-hour drive, and I'm in the middle of the country by the end of the day. And it is the most beautiful thing in the world. It's quiet, it's peaceful, it's clean, it smells good. It's everything that Chicago is not. So I think that's the way that I do, but I don't, I have to be fueled by God because I don't eat right. I don't exercise. Like, really, you just don't have a lot of time to care for yourself when you're caring for everybody else. But I think God takes care of you when you take care of others. That's just kind of how I roll.
Yeah.
It's on you.
Sister, before we leave, you're gonna sing us just belt out a little bit of a singing is good for
I'm
us.
not gonna do it. I didn't come for that.
What you came for? It was gonna be interaction. You don't know what the interaction is
No,
gonna be.
I don't even have on my karaoke shoes.
I knew you were a soul sister, but you gotta have the shoes.
There's a whole get up. Yes. You have to get in character. That's why I'm the champ. I mean, I just take the whole thing, the whole persona, I just take it all on.
You dress like Aretha?
I will, don't think I won't.
I think that's a poor excuse for not singing. I mean, just a little of the chorus of the song. Actually, I think singing is really, really good. I belong to St. Gabe's African American Catholic community where I go to Mass when I'm in town. It ends up being like maybe once a month because I'm out a lot. But just being in the presence of a community that is the struggle, and the music is every bit as important, if not more important than the preaching, the sermon. And the sacrament of the Eucharist when you gather together for Mass is just remembering that someone who loved so much that he taught us even that you could love people to the death, which is what Jesus is really about, and to be generous, and to be in a community of people singing together. And I actually think, I mean, where else can you go on a regular basis to sing if it's not in a religious community? I mean, but singing, I just think, is really part of getting our soul back.
You gotta come to the block. You gotta promise me you're gonna come to the block this summer.
I want to come to I'm gonna come to the block if you sing us something. I'm gonna come to the block if you sing us something here. No, yeah.
We're gonna do a duet. This
I'm
is
talking about here tonight.
And we are taking our show on the road. Let's do this.
I knew it was gonna be interactive. I didn't know it was gonna be this. Okay, looks like I gotta come to the block, but you gotta sing.
I'm not gonna sing here tonight. Oh, okay.
Well, why you call me to something you're not willing to do something?
No, look, okay, I'll come to Louisiana.
I'm talking about singing things. I ain't moving my line.
Drawn it.
We'll sing with you.
No.
Okay. Okay, I think we have to end on that note. I'll see you right after. But being whole, so I'm out. The connectivity with people is life. And one of the ways I replenish life, well, I mentioned St. Gabe's, but I have really good friends, like Rose Vines that works, we work together. She is really a good friend. And she's probably a genius because she can read a book on how to do woodworking and she does it. She can read a book on physics, she understands it. She can read a book on, she's very, very smart, but not just smart with mind. And so she hears me reading things because we're working on this graphic novel together, Dead Man Walking. So I'm reading 2 books simultaneously. One is Richard Rohr's on the mystery of the Trinity, that God is relational, that God is not this monolithic being apart from us, but omniscient, knows everything, can do everything, and then intrudes in the world, that makes people reject God, because that's a terrible God to have. But God's relational. What did we always mean by Trinity? Father, Son, Spirit. Well, this guy, Richard Rohr, has written a book on that, calling it the divine dance, that life is flow, life is connectivity, life is relationship. Then Rose gets me this book on, now y'all gonna flip, but it's Quantum Entanglement in Quantum Mechanics, and it's a graphic novel on quantum entanglement. That when you go down, 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 down to the subatomic particles of light, everything is connected. It's connectivity that gives us life. And so it's like when you have these little, help me Rose if I'm saying it wrong, but when you get down to subatomic particles, they like twinned. And when one flips, the other one flips. One might be in one galaxy and the other's 50 million light years away, and when one flips, the other one flips. Now believe me, this is a crass explanation of quantum entanglement. But see, I have this hunch that we are just so connected, and the relationship with Rose and I working together and all is part of that. But with Manuel on death row, who's the man on death row that I'm accompanying now, and so I go and visit him and am with him every month, no matter what the weather is. I'm coming, I'm gonna be with Manuel, and I'm walking into death row where life awaits me of a man who's innocent. He's the third one out of the 7 people I've been with on death row, the third innocent one. And he's going on 27 years. And he has not given up his courage. And I get to visit with him. And we have a friendship and a connectivity. And I walk out of that prison and I'm strengthened, I am enlivened, I am more alive from the connection with him. That most people would see it as, oh, there goes the good nun pouring herself out on those poor condemned men. And here I am walking away because all the best stuff in life is mutual or it is nothing. I mean, when you read these stories of these people pouring themselves out, that they're the great givers and the other people are the empty vessels, that's wrong. That can never be. That's never sustaining. It's got to be that it's mutual. Just being in archives and seeing what our archivists do to make available what went into the whole book, the experience, just making that available, the quiet work that people do. But that's connectivity with us. And then when I go home, we have 2 little apartments. One is our office where Sister Margaret and her team, the other people work to do the scheduling, do everything that comes. And it's always we work by the invitations we get. I have a picture of the Annunciation on the wall. I never try to initiate, hey, I want to go to this place. Let's see if we can get invited there. Just wait for the invitation. DePaul came as an invitation, and here I am. And I get life from being here. And the connection with people that you grow to love and connect with. And I love being with young people because I just see young people really have power and potential and they're trying to figure it out. It's like you were saying, what am I going to be? What am I going to do? Oh, you know, all that. And just to be in the presence of people, it's just such a gift. But I need the solitude. So when I go home to my little apartment, and I have a little bird feeder, and the little birds come, and it's such a gift when a bird comes. You can't make a bird come to your feeder. When a bird comes, that's a gift, right? And then when I put out the sunflower seeds, you know, the blue jay comes, and you just see them marking that blue jay, beautiful. And then the wife of the cardinal always comes, the mama comes before the husband comes. And here she comes with her little tawny brown color so she can protect her babies in the nest. She's not colorful. And then here he comes, big red, and he comes. And they eat my seed, and I get to see them. And it's Louisiana, so it's verdant. Everything grows in Louisiana. You put anything in the ground, it's going to grow. So it's green and flowering now. It's April. It's spring. And so you get to have your feet on the ground, you get to cook good Cajun food, like red beans and rice and stuff. And have your friends over, play some card games, drink some beer or some good scotch. Y'all drink? Do the Buddhists drink? Joy?
Some do.
Oh, some do, okay.
I'm with you, Sister Helen. I'm a bourbon girl.
You're a bourbon girl? Okay, well, you gotta watch it because it can just be a crutch to make you feel high when you're not feeling high, and then next thing you know. Anyway, I from the South, and I started drinking wine when I was 6. I belonged to a French family, and so it's just like, thank God, Jesus drank. I mean, John the Baptist followed John the Baptist. They don't drink it, so thank God for Jesus, first miracle. Water, water. But I mean, the joy of life, right? And so I don't know, I'm just rattling on and on and on. You know what I'm saying? But except I'm happy and happy to be here. I do think that when we do what we're called to do, even though we may get tired, there is a deep joy and satisfaction because just out of, okay, I'm there. And it's a sense of purpose and okay, I'm gonna do my bit. I'll just put it out there and just leave it up to God to do the rest. And we are seeing a harvest. We are ending the death penalty in the United States, but it can't happen too soon because the suffering of people on death row is so terrible. The torture, the way we're killing people is so terrible. It can't end soon enough. And it's out of Illinois now, but please look at your energies to see how we can end it in other states so that we will not let our government be killing people. So there's that urgency. And then there's that, it's just life is whole. It's all connected one to the other. I think the Buddhists, they have so much wisdom because they see that. And just the concrete tasks of making sandwiches. That was the first thing I ever did. I was in a homeless shelter in Cincinnati. My job was to serve the Kool-Aid at the end of the line. I had never been in a place like this before. And here comes a young guy, college age, looked like Joe College, and his hand was trembling when I served him the Kool-Aid. And he said, "You gotta help me, it's my first time here." And I said to the guy in charge, "What is that young kid?" He said, "We'll talk to him before the night's out. We're gonna find out what is he doing homeless." But it was that connection with people, and something in me just came alive. And a part of me said, I've been waiting my whole life to be connected to something real like this. And then you just take it step by step by step. And it unfolds like a flower or like a wave. But all you do is do your step. And then you gotta let it on. You can't have your little blueprint plan. You notice?
Ain't no plans.
And then you sing as you go along, like Aretha Franklin. And then you know it's going to give joy to communities. You sing.
Oh, I love you. I just love you so much. I do. I'm not singing nothing.
Let's give our panelists a hand.